Resident Evil Village introduces a concept that, when examined, has the potential to be the unifying principle that brings the entire game series together. For one simple discovery by a grieving mother set forth a series of events that nearly destroyed the world. This is the hidden story of the Megamycete and mold in Resident Evil Village.
Alpha to squad. I've located the Megamycete.
So now we can end this mess after all.
It all begins over 100 years ago, when Miranda, not yet known as Mother, lost her daughter Eva to the Spanish flu. After burying her in Potter's Field, she intended to end her own life, but instead, she experienced a miracle, as she writes here in her personal journal.
After I lost you, I was so stricken with grief that I wandered into a cave to die. I so wanted to be with you again, and that's when I found it, the Megamycete, completely by accident. When I touched the black substance, my mind was overcome with knowledge. The Megamycete breaks down and absorbs the consciousness of those who have perished. I knew that if your consciousness was in there too, then there would be a way to bring you back. I just needed the right vessel.
This Megamycete, also known as fungal root, is a fetus-like entity of an unknown time that has spread its roots throughout this Eastern European village. And in that process, those roots navigated their way into the decaying bodies of those buried in the region. And through the DNA of those people, something close to consciousness was reinstituted into the heart of the Megamycete. Miranda's daughter was recently buried, and she was able to, by imprinting on the Megamycete, hear or at the very least experience the consciousness of her daughter alive once again. This was all Miranda needed, and she began a century-long journey to use the powers of the Megamycete to bring her daughter back to life. This Megamycete, a hive mind, if you will, is the root of the entity. The leaves, or mold, are the receptors that infect anyone that it touches, trying to subsume them into that hive mind, but also it's still able to be manipulated. Miranda used this mold and manipulated it to create experiments that would expand the network of the Megamycete without ever becoming a slave to it herself. In fact, through researching the mold, she gained something close to eternal life and the ability to direct the mold to do her bidding. As she explains further in her journal, the experimentation led to a monumental discovery.
When I returned to the village, I implanted the villagers with mold from the Megamycete. That way I could control them, experiment on them. I have experimented on hundreds of people, just to find you the perfect vessel. I even tried to increase the efficiency of finding a vessel by creating a parasite I called Cadeau. Yet none of my experiments came to fruition. There were some, like Alcina, who were close to being perfect, but most turned into lichens.
She found that those who were infected by the mold would go through different stages of infection. As a research note in Resident Evil 7 explains, the mold ingests nutrients from the subject's body to propagate itself and slowly takes over cells within the body, causing remarkable regenerative abilities as a side effect. Infected subjects are capable of reattaching legs and arms within minutes if severed, and this effect can be compounded with the use of first aid medicine, which causes spontaneous cellular regeneration, something that's important to remember for later. Eventually, in its raw state, this mold will slowly break down the minds of those infected and even kill them. So Miranda discovered a gift, a nematode parasite she dubbed as Cadeau, or in the Romanian, gift, when infected by the mold, can more easily correspond with human physiology and transfer the powers and even possible hive mind consciousness of the Megamycete. She uses this Cadeau method to infect regular people who often would become lichen monsters but in a select few, they gained powers thanks to that mold. We know them as the Four Lords of the Village. They all gained a series of abilities thanks to the parasite and continued Miranda's work infecting others, which does mean, based on our understanding of the Megamycete and the mold, everyone that Ethan kills in the game, from the first Lycan to Lady D herself, their consciousness should theoretically join that hive mind, and they could be possibly reanimated once again. All of these great discoveries that Miranda made over 100 years indicated a real mastery of the science and gained her a student, Oswell E. Spencer, the man who would go on to create the Umbrella Corporation and the progenitor T-Virus project, which, as we know, is one of the defining moments of Resident Evil. If he had never stumbled upon Miranda's lab and her work, it's safe to say that most of what we know as Resident Evil never would have happened. During Miranda's research, she also discovered an organization known as the Connections.
I was once approached by an organization who said they would assist me. I gave them some of the mold and your DNA, but all they created was another defect. Eveline. Then again, not a complete failure. I learned of Rose thanks to them, and I knew she would be the perfect vessel. There was some interference, but I was able to verify her suitability. Now my research is finally complete. Ava, I have waited too long to see you again.
This confirms that Mother Miranda helped create Eveline, the nemesis from Resident Evil 7, by using some of Eva's DNA and the Megamycete mold. It's important to note that giving the direct DNA, not a Cadeau parasite, allowed the research team to harness the powers of the Megamycete without their subject being enslaved to it and its limitations. And it also explains why the mold was in America. Eveline brought it there through her Megamycete links. This group, known as the Connections, wanted a bioweapon to influence the minds of people subversively, the ultimate weapon of control, destroying nations without firing a shot. They created prototype E001 and named her Eveline. While heading to Central America, the tanker Eveline was on was hit by a hurricane, and Eveline decided at that point, after years of growing in this accelerated environment, that she didn't want to be a weapon, but instead, she wanted to have a family. Mia, Ethan's wife, at the time was working on developing Eveline as that weapon and was spared because Eveline saw her as something of a maternal figure. After that ship crashed on the shores of Louisiana, both Eveline and Mia were saved by the Baker family, and they were repaid with their kindness and consideration by slowly losing their minds and lives thanks to Eveline's influence. As Jack Baker explains, this influence that Eveline had via the Megamycete isn't as simple as just mind control.
So she infects you and then she takes control?
No. Not exactly, son. She just... She forces her way into your mind, your soul. You can't fight back. You are connected to her, and you can't resist the urge to... Oh, you're a different person after that.
Just like Mia. So Mia sent me that message because of Eveline.
Listen, the girl just wants a family of her own.
Maybe it had something to do with Eva's DNA, but Eveline had abilities that even Miranda's lords didn't. She could directly control the mold through her influence of the Megamycete without a Cadeau parasite. She could use the mold developed by the Megamycete to create monsters and husks of those infected and give her new family near invincibility, as Jack continuously comes back again and again after dying at the hands of Ethan in RE7 in a more twisted and deformed state. She would even reconstitute the dead around her into monsters known as molded. Not quite dead, but also not quite alive. From the initial discovery of Eveline, when the Baker family found her on the shores, over the next 3 years, she began to age rapidly, nearly 25 times the rate of a normal human being. And as that happened, she demanded that the Baker family abduct more and more people to join her twisted idea of what a family was. Much like Donna Benviento did in Resident Evil Village, Eveline was able to make Ethan hallucinate horrible terrors around him before finally, in their final confrontation, he stabbed her with a neurotoxin antidote that freed him from this state, and she regressed into a monstrous blob of mold, desperately trying to end Ethan's life. Once Ethan finally ended that threat, she crumbled into nothing, just like so many other molded lords have done in Resident Evil 8. Although it seems final, this would not be the last time we see Eveline. Nearing the end of Resident Evil Village, Ethan meets his untimely demise at the hands of Mother Miranda, who rips his heart out, explaining that now he will join the Megamycete after death. Ethan, as you all know, doesn't die, and instead speaks to Eveline in his own mind, perhaps in a hallucination, who explains that Ethan had actually died 3 years ago at the hands of Jack Baker, and that he was brought back to life by the same mold affliction that the Bakers had, except Ethan was special. Ethan wasn't influenced or controlled by Eveline like the Bakers and Miranda. He also wasn't contorted or subsumed by the mold's powers and turned into a monster like the Bakers, and even like several of the lords of the village. Ethan just gained the ability to reconstitute himself after losing limbs and pieces with what we thought was a magical healing salve, but we know now it was all thanks to the mold and the Megamycete. Considering his ongoing infection, it's strange that he wasn't even susceptible to Miranda's controlling influence, considering she is in many ways the mother of the Megamycete. This has to mean something we don't yet know about Ethan, something exceedingly special that gave him that barrier that perhaps was transferred to his child Rose. Although the mold may be able to give him the power to deal with untold abuse, he still wasn't immortal, and after saving his daughter Rose from Miranda's Megamycete monster, which is now taking control of the entire village, he begins to eventually crumble away. And ultimately, he makes the choice to sacrifice himself to destroy the Megamycete, giving Rose to Chris and Mia to now take care of. If the Megamycete is truly destroyed, then Ethan, even with his powers, should be no more. But that also means that Rose should either be destroyed or at the very least changed by the loss of the Megamycete, as she inherited this special infection from Ethan and to a lesser extent Mia. Rose is still very much alive. After the game's over, in her epilogue, we see her honoring her father and threatened an unnamed official who intentionally calls her Eveline, which Rose is not a fan of, explaining she's even more powerful than they can imagine. Based on our understanding of the Megamycete, the mold, and Eveline, it's safe to assume that this consciousness, this hive mind, known as the Megamycete, is alive in Rose in some way or another. And it's also safe to assume if it's still alive, so too is the mold that Rose can manipulate, like Eveline and those before her did. Or else, why would this agency claim that she has these powers? If we think now of Eveline, who was able to live on in some way thanks to the Megamycete, is it not also safe to assume that Ethan, who had this special infection and died in the Megamycete, is still around in Rose's mind? This concept is further fueled by some clever modders who discovered that the person Rose drives by at the very final moments of the game is very much a model of Ethan Winters. This, of course, leaves us with so many questions as to Rose's power, her relation to the Megamycete, and if Ethan is still knocking around in that hive mind. But it's also likely that this epilogue is not 25 years in the future, despite Rose's appearance. Rose perhaps has that same hyper-aging condition that Eveline did, and it's only a few years after the events of Resident Evil. Either way, the Megamycete is the key to, in some ways, everything that's happened in the Resident Evil franchise. I can't imagine it's now entirely gone forever. I hope that was as clear as it could be and you enjoyed my series looking at the game and the hidden lore within. The final video in this series will be later this week. It'll be on the leaders of the village and the lichens that spawn them. Thanks again. I'm Andy Burkowski for VGS.